This summer, I had a job with the city, cutting grass and clearing garbage in the local parks and on nature trails. We had to wear masks and stuff due to the pandemic, but since we work outside, social distancing wasn't a big deal. Besides, it was a good way to get lots of vitamin D. One of these parks was in the deep valley of a long, large creek, a river really. My parents told me that when they were growing up, it was a wild, semi-wilderness area, unspoiled nature in the middle of a factory town, and an excellent place to party. Now, the primeval had been pasteurized, and the valley crisscrossed with manicured trails to enable suburbanites to enjoy the outdoors in a domesticated manner. In other words, it's boring. But at least it's fresh air. This particular day, the truck dropped 3 of us off at the job: Andrea, Dave, and me. Andrea was a good-looking blonde studying business admin at Western. In truth, she was pretty hot, but she also made it very clear she considered me beneath her class. Okay, to tell the truth, I was used to that sort of treatment. Dave was a real stoner and took off to frolic with Fido, if you catch my meaning, as soon as we got to the site. This particular park had trails along a flat area adjacent to the creek, but was connected to a sharp ridge of shale. Dave told us he was going to check out the dirt trails atop the ridge for safety reasons. For smoking reasons, more likely. Lazy bum. Well, at least he was practicing social distancing. Andrea went to work pulling weeds alongside the trail while I walked along bagging garbage. Since she wasn't going to talk to me, at least I could get some exercise. It was Friday, so I was looking forward to having a few beers with some of my incel buddies later that evening. It was a coolish day, but the sun was hot and I was enjoying myself, as well as a guy could, picking up garbage. I was thinking about nothing when the screaming started. Andrea came running over to me. What's going on? Is that Dave? As if I would know. What I said was, he probably dropped his weed in the creek. Shouldn't we go look, she said. Meaning, shouldn't I go look? Okay, I said without enthusiasm. When Dave appeared, frantically scrabbling down the side of the ridge, still screaming at the top of his lungs. We watched appalled as Dave's body shook and jerked like a demonic puppet with the St. Vitus dance. He seemed to be surrounded by a moving gray cloud. Smoke? Had the silly bastard set himself on fire? And that's when we heard the buzzing. Bees, wasps, hornets, whatever. Big ones. I reached out and touched Andrea, something I'd never done before. In fact, I grabbed her arm. Come on, we've got to get out of here, I shouted. But she remained rooted on the spot. Andrea, we've got to get out of here. Now! She didn't move. I began tugging at her arm, quite hard. Under normal circumstances, she would have pulled away from me and told me to get lost. But now she was staring, transfixed, at Dave, who had fallen to his knees, his whole body covered by a moving mass of large stinging insects. And any second now, they would be coming this way. Christ, he even had hornets or whatever they were in his eyes, in his nostrils, in his mouth. I gave Andrea's arm one last tug, and then I turned and ran. I sprinted towards the creek. It was usually pretty shallow, but we weren't that far from a bend in the river, where it was about 5 feet deep and where I could get underwater. Okay, so it wasn't a great idea, but it was the only idea I had, and I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. Andrea had been dead silent, but now she started screaming before I made it to the water's edge. I wanted to jump right in, but forced myself to wade in and slowly and carefully move over the rocks until I reached the deepest part, right in the middle of the creek, where the cold water was up to my chest. I took a quick look before going under. The bees, wasps, whatever they were swirling around Andrea, who was trying to swat them while covering her face. She was now moving, if you call running around in circles moving. But not all the insects were swirling around her. Some were headed in my direction. A lot of them. And as they approached, I got my first real look at them. They were hornets, but hornets 4 or 5 times bigger than any hornets I had ever seen. And they wanted me. I dived under. I wasn't sure how long I could hold my breath underwater, nor did I know if my sudden disappearance would confuse the hornets and make them fly somewhere else. I kinda doubted I would be so lucky. I knew I couldn't stay under long. All the pizza and donuts were catching up to me, so my idea was to splash a lot of water around when I surfaced to drive them away. I surfaced to the drone of loud buzzing, a cloud of the huge hornets swirling above me. I splashed water into the air, cupping it with my hands for maximum effect. I could tell they didn't like it, not that I had much time to look, and some of them fell atop the water, and to my horror, began to swim towards me. I submerged again. I came to the surface splashing and ducked under almost immediately, but I had time to see A, the current was taking the hornets, which were in the water, away from me, and B, Andrea, shrieking, was running hard towards the creek. I came up again and repeated the whole splashing process as I saw, out of the corner of my eye, Andrea tumble head first into the water. I was just heading under when I realized a swimming hornet had reached my hand, and it stung me. It felt like I had touched a high-voltage power line. White, searing, shocking pain. I screamed, swallowing a mouthful of dirty water, and knocked the dead hornet away, surfacing, coughing, and spitting. Luckily for me, the hornets were gone. They were now swarming and alighting on Andrea, who lay half in and half out of the water. And she wasn't moving. I ducked back under and then resurfaced, and repeated the process again and again over the next 20 minutes, until I finally realized the hornets were gone. I stood up, so my head was out of the water, and I sucked in great mouthfuls of air. And after a while, I made my way over to Andrea's body, Andrea's corpse, and dragged her out of the water, turning her over on her back. The hornets had destroyed her face. I bet she'd be ready to go out with me now. I was only able to turn her body over slowly, as I could only really work with one hand. The hand that had been stung, my right hand, had swollen up like a balloon, and burned and throbbed. I hadn't really noticed the burning pain when I was in the water. I had to get to the hospital, quick, but I couldn't find my phone, which was probably at the bottom of the creek. I reluctantly searched Andrea's pockets, but I couldn't find hers. Had she had it in her hand when we were attacked? I couldn't remember. I searched half-heartedly, but the insistent pain forced me to give up. I didn't bother to look for Dave's phone, which I was sure would have no battery. No battery. I had to get to the road, see if I could flag down a car. And at the road, I found a car. It was stopped dead in the middle of the road. Doors open. The body of a middle-aged man, or what used to be a middle-aged man, was hanging, half in, half out of the car, the interior of which was full of dead hornets, hundreds of them. The man's phone was lying on the seat, so I grabbed it and punched in 911. The line was busy. The line was busy. It's fucking 911. How can the line be busy? I tried a few more times before giving up and tossing the man's phone back onto the seat in disgust. Somebody would come along. Some other car. So I leaned against the car. A Ford something, naturally. And waited. Waited. But after 5 minutes, it became obvious nothing was going to come. And this was a busy street, too. It was the Hornets. Must have been. I was going to have to walk to the hospital. There was no other choice. My hand had swollen to twice its normal size, was beginning to turn purple, and I was starting to feel feverish. Geez, I hope I wasn't coming down with COVID-19. The hospital was about a mile away. I staggered up Cornwall, and there were bodies all along the way. Some were in cars, many in the middle of the road, while others lay sprawled across the sidewalk, purple, black, and swollen. The Hornets had been responsible in every case. It was a nightmare stroll. I didn't encounter anything alive all the way to the hospital, and I began to wonder if I was the only human being alive in the entire world. After half an hour, I staggered into emergency, in a delirium. The place was in shambles, with broken glass, overturned chairs and carts, and corpses, several human, and thousands of hornets. Nothing alive. "Hello!" I yelled. "Hello!" Only to hear my voice echo down the empty corridors. "Is there anyone there?" There wasn't. And that's when I heard the buzzing of the approaching swarm, getting louder as it got closer, closer and louder, closer and louder, closer and louder, closer. And I began to run.